Okay, welcome everyone. Let's get started. My name's Joss Colster. I'm part of the Systems Innovation London Hub. Today, I'm going to be walking you through our Systems Innovation Toolkit. Just letting a few more people in here. Hope you can all hear me fine and see the screen, and we're ready to go. It should be about 45 minutes. Presentation, and we'll stop intermittently to take any questions or comments or anything you'd like to talk about. So let's get started. What we're talking about is Systems Innovation Toolkit. This is a series of guides, a series of canvases for essentially doing systems innovation, workshops, labs, and so forth, as we'll talk about. I produced this series of canvases, and it's based upon a series of guides. So I'm going to show you that in a minute, but let's just quickly have an overview to what we're talking about here. Systems Innovation Toolkit is designed as an open source set of modules that can be combined to support a systems change initiative. The building blocks of this toolkit are the canvases, which we'll be talking about today. Each canvas deals with one key aspect of systems innovation. The canvas will help you think through and develop a response to a key question you'll need to answer. For example, who are the actors in the system? Or where are the places I should intervene? These building blocks can be accessed and used as individual modules, or they can be strung together to form a process, depending on the time horizon of the initiative. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's take a look at it here. Each of these canvases, there's about 20, 30 individual canvases. So they can be used as individual modules to run a workshop or whatever it is you're doing, or they can be put together in some overall process. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Different sections so that we can actually run a systems innovation process of some kind. So before I start, these canvases are tools, and those tools have a set of ideas behind them, right? These are the canvases here. This is where you'll find them on the website. If you go to systemsinnovation.io and then you go to canvases, you'll see it on the side here, and you'll see each one listed there. As I said, there's about 30 of them or so. But as I say, those are just tools, and you would need to understand the ideas behind those tools before you use most of them, right? So for example, the two loops canvas, it's a tool, but it's also a model, the two loops model, and you'd need to understand that before you start. So if you don't, then you should take a look at the guides here. All of these canvases are based upon the guides. So for example, that two loops model, this is it here. This is the guide that has all the ideas that will teach you or teach whoever you're training about the ideas behind the two loops model. And then you could use the canvas as a workshop to go through that. So the canvases themselves don't contain the ideas. You'd have to look here first. Same for all the other canvases are built upon these ones here, these guides here, and the framework is based upon this framework here. So if you don't know the guides or you don't know the ideas, you should probably take a look at this first and learn all about that, and then you can jump into the canvases here. So getting back to that, this here, I'm going to show you now the toolkit, and you can find the toolkit here in the canvases section. This is it here. You just click there and you'll be able to download it. All of these are freely available. So they're there on our website. They're available for anybody to download and use. So getting back to this here, it's this idea of you may want to use them individually, which you're welcome to do, or you may want to put them into an overall process, a systems change initiative. So this is the overall kind of framework we use, both for the guides and for the canvases. And it starts off, it's a process. It starts off with the ideation. So these canvases, there's about 6 canvases for each of these sections, 5, 6, or 7 canvases. The ideation one, these canvases help you think in systems, change the paradigm, and see radical new possibilities. So this is about helping people think differently, think in systems instead of the reductionist thinking. I'll show you what those look like in a minute. This one here is for mapping the system. Once we've understood once we have a new paradigm around systems thinking, we want to understand the system and map it out and get a holistic kind of understanding of what it looks like. So these canvases are going to help us make a holistic inquiry and map out the actors, structures, and dynamics of the system. Then we jump into change, trying to change the system now that we have mapped it out. So these canvases walk you through for working with transition processes, finding points to intervene in the network to influence, to effectively influence change. And then these last ones are about systems building. So these canvases are building new networked organizations, new platforms, new ecosystems for bringing people together and coordinating them, enabling collaboration around a given challenge. So that's the overall structure. And as I say, you can use that if you wish, or you can use the canvases individually. So one consideration is kind of the time horizon, right, of what you're doing. Are you just running a 1 hour, 2 hour workshop, or are you running a much more substantial kind of change project here? And we've structured, we've created a template that brings the canvases together depending upon the time horizon of your initiative, right? So if you want to do a short little thing, we call that an ideation, 1 hour, 2 hours. If you're doing something longer, maybe a week long, we call that a sprint. If you had many weeks and months on this particular challenge working with people, we call that a lab, and we have a template for that that brings the modules together within that time horizon. If you're working, over many years to build an ecosystem around a wicked challenge, then you'd need kind of an ecosystem template. So we have those here, right? This is the ideation one. It's very, as I say, it's just for about 1 hour or 2 hours. I'll show you it quickly. And it quickly goes through those different aspects I talked about, the ideation, the mapping, the changing, and so forth, right? So you can see it here. And this you can do within an hour. We've done workshops for 60 minutes, 90 minutes with this, and that's fine. All you're going to do is come up with new ideas, right? It's an ideation process. You can't do much in 90 minutes. So that's the shortest version of all of this. Then you can do a sprint, as I say, and the kind of template for that is there. You can do a lab, that's a longer thing, template for that's there, and then building ecosystems, that one's there. So I'm not going to go further into that. I'll leave that for you to take a look at, and we'll jump further into the canvases. So as I said, they're structured like this. The first one is around ideation and systems thinking. So here it is, systems thinking, and these are the modules. Well, this is what we're trying to do here. This is the ideation phase. We want to try and change our thinking and way of looking at the system so that we can start to see new possibilities. This requires us first to become aware of our current ways of thinking and then shift them to a more holistic view with which to see differently and start to create new ways of organizing. So these are the canvases in this section. And this first one is kind of an overview to systems thinking. We'll take a look at it now. This one starts with holistic thinking. This one's reflexive thinking, ecosystem thinking. We'll take a look at those now. So here it is, systems thinking. This module is designed to help members try and change their way of thinking and way of looking at the world towards a more holistic paradigm that is characteristic of systems thinking. This is done by looking at 4 main dimensions to our thinking that we can start to try and change. And I'll show you here. If you have this guide, then this links to the canvas. And all the canvases are here in our Google Drive. It's kind of database. So this sit here, and you can see there, each canvas will try and have a summary on 1 page, right? You can see it here. This is summarizing the whole thing on 1 canvas. And then below, we break it down into the individual parts so that you can take this and you can put it onto a mirror board or print it out or whatever it is. But you can see the whole thing here. And there's just four main dimensions, trying to shift from reductionist thinking to emergence thinking. So we're asking them, these are a series of questions. What does it look like to look at the current system through a reductionist approach? How might we look at it through an emergent way? so on and so forth. How might we shift from linear thinking to non-linear thinking? And you can see all those there. I'm not going to go into the details of every canvas because it's too much information, but just to give you an idea. I'll stop now in a minute for questions, but we'll just look at a few more in this section of systems thinking. So that's the systems thinking one. Then we have a reflexive thinking one. It's about people becoming aware of their ways of thinking. You can see it here. So it's getting people to see try and become aware of their underlying assumptions about how they're thinking about things, and particularly with respect to reductionism. And then how's that shaping their view of the world? And then how are they acting from that? You can see it here, reflexive thinking. And then how's that creating the outcomes that we're seeing in the system? So becoming aware of how our thinking is shaping how we see the world and how we're acting and the outcomes that we get. And just simply walking people through that, asking them questions, you know, what are the key words we use to talk about the system? This will kind of surface our underlying mental models and so forth, and then how we're looking at it, so on and so forth. The reflexive thinking one. This is the iceberg one. So it's a bit like U theory. If you're familiar with U theory, you're probably familiar with the iceberg model, has different levels to it. The event level, you can see it here. The event level, the patterns, structures, mental models. And here we're simply going down one side of this, and we're asking what are the existing, this is the view of the whole canvas here. On this side, we're going down and we're asking, what are the current events that we see in the system? What are the current patterns, current structures, current mental models? And then we're going up the other side and asking, well, how could we change that paradigm? This is them becoming aware. We get them to fill this out, post up their stickies or whatever it is. So they become aware of the system on its different levels, all the way from the underlying assumptions to the structures and so forth. And then we try to shift that, right? Over here, we go up the other side asking, well, what would the new paradigm look like? What would it be like if we changed our underlying assumptions, particularly from a reductionist analytical approach to a more holistic systems thinking approach? And then we work up this side again and say, okay, if we had that new set of mental models, then what would the new structures that emerge out of that look like? And what would the new patterns that come from those structures look like? And what would be the new events that we'd see in the system? So that's the iceberg canvas. I think that's one of the better ones. Some canvases are better than others. It's quite holistic. It's a good ideation process to get people looking at, you know, thinking about what exists. Thank you, Jean. A thumbs up. There we go. And what could be in the future. So it's quite similar. If you're familiar with U theory, it's quite similar to that. It's a little bit different, but somewhat similar. Okay, so that's the iceberg canvas, and then we'll stay going here. This is all about changing our thinking. This one's the ecosystem canvas. Again, it's inspired by Otto Scharmer, trying to shift our thinking from ecosystem to ecosystem, us at the center of the world, to us as part of a broader network, as part of an ecosystem. And here we're just asking, okay, what does it look like? We're asking the members who are partaking in this workshop, what does it look like to look at this system through an egocentric perspective? They post up their ideas there, and then we ask them, okay, what would it look like to look at this from an ecosystems perspective? And they post up their ideas there. And through that process, they can get a better understanding of both of those and what it means to look in this new way. Okay, just one or two more, and then I'll stop for any questions that you might have. This one's the emergence canvas. So this is obviously quite a simple one. I think it's a good one. It's quite simple though. This one is the emergence canvas. It's just starting to try and get people thinking about how local interactions may lead to the emergence of higher level patterns and organization. And yep, you're welcome to take a look at these canvases afterwards, but I'll stay going. Yeah, that's it for the first section on systems thinking. Maybe I'll take a little pause. If you have any questions or comments or anything I can respond to. feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
Hi, I was just wondering whether there's any concrete filled-in system canvas examples that are there, because I seem to learn better from concrete examples and moving towards the abstract rather than the other way around.
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, there aren't. Probably could benefit from that. Some of them are pretty straightforward. So I think you grasp them, but other ones would definitely benefit from what you say. It's a good point. Could probably do with that. At the moment, there isn't. Hopefully, in the future, we'll get some more of those.
Thanks.
Josh, which of these canvases? Because every time I look back, I'm stunned at how many cool new canvases you've added. So good job on making all this stuff and having all these templates ready to go. That's awesome. What in the past maybe year, which ones have proven the most popular thus far?
Yeah, so we're just still starting to experiment with them. I mean, obviously, I don't have the information. A lot of people are using these, actually, right? I don't know. I can only give you the perspective from our hubs at the moment and what they've done so far. And the ones that I've used. So it's a good question, right? Because some of them are definitely better than others. I think the system thinking one is very good, but I haven't really used it very much so far. So I think it'll be popular in the long run. The ones that I do have feedback from are the multi-level perspective here. We've used it quite a few times. Just a couple of days ago, we used it in the Singapore hub, and I used it in the London hub. It's a well-known, prominent one. It's a very good one, and this is a really good canvas. It just takes quite a bit of work, actually, more work than you can do in just an hour or two. So it's a little bit longer. I guess I'll wait. I'll be getting there in a little bit, so I could talk more about that then. But that's one we have used, and it is a good one. It just takes a bit of time. The other one we have used is this one here, the leverage points one, which is really good. I have a couple of pictures, I think, here. Maybe I could show you, both from New York. This is Celine in New York, running it at Complexity Weekend, our New York hub, running at Complexity Weekend. She took the challenge of organizing around climate change in the center there. And she thought it was really good. And also they used it in Singapore too. And there's very good feedback from that also. So this is one of the best ones, I think, and it's original too. There isn't another canvas out there like this. So people often get interested in this one.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's a good answer. Thank you. I'm going to throw this out there as well. Obviously, there's a few ways you could slice and dice the canvases in terms of organizing them or filtering them. It sounds like you saying some of them are easier, more accessible. Some of them are a bit longer or more advanced. Is that a spectra to say it's like, listen, this is easy stuff you could teach to a 9th grader. This is advanced stuff you might want to have some years of facilitation experience before you dig into, but maybe there's such a cross section that that would actually, it would just create weird gateways that don't need to be there.
Yeah, no, it's a good. We should probably have that, right, as part of the description, saying easy, intermediate, or advanced, or something like that, or even filtering like that. Yeah, it's a good point. And some are, you can do in an hour, and some, like I said, that multi-level perspective, you're not going to be able to do them in an hour. So
totally.
Yeah.
And frankly, they in that way sound like great, internal organizational, but great consulting tools, right? If it might take you, 3, 4, or 5 hours, or 2 or 3 sessions to get through that, good. Like you should, then that all the better, all the more worth digging into, right? Love it.
Yep.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, let's stay going. Any other questions? Thanks, Robert.
Hi, Joss. It's Ebru here. I just wanted to ask one question. I actually wrote it in the chat. How can we combine different canvases? And are there any best practices on combining more than one canvas?
Yeah, well, so maybe you missed the first section there where I talked about how you combine them?
Yeah, I was a little bit late, yes.
Yeah, so just up here, we talked about the overall kind of structures of the whole thing, the framework. It goes a bit like this, where there's it starts with ideation, then mapping and analyzing the system, and then change and building. So that's the overall structure. And then, of course, within each section, if you just wanted to do ideation, then you would kind of put together the ones within that section of systems thinking and ideation. Or if you just wanted to do mapping, you'd put them in. So there's two, different ways. You could do the whole thing, Ebru. And as I talked about, that kind of depends upon your time horizon. So we've got templates that put them together depending on different time horizons. Or you could just put them together where you can mix and match them yourselves, or you could just say, oh, I want to do something in mapping and then put those ones together, or I just want to do something and put those ones together. If you took a look at this guide on the website, it's there. This one here, you would see what I presented at the beginning. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, or shall I stay going?
Tiny question, teeny tiny question. I probably look funny, but at any rate, I was wondering about when you think about process of filling these things in, right? Are you leaning more towards just mob style, bunch of Post-its, go for it? Or do you have recommendations for how to structure a workshop around these things, for example? Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe I should have had more images of what we've done. But you have each question, right? So most canvases have about 4 to 5, 6, 7 questions, and each one, let's take a look at what I was just talking about. Yeah, where's a good example here? Finance event here. So this is the multi-level perspective we did on finance, mapping the transition towards a new financial paradigm. And we put up these frames, Jeremy, and each frame is a particular question. What does the landscape changes look like? And then people put in their stickies there. So that's about as structured as it gets in terms of the different questions and different frames. But yes, within that, each question and each frame, they put up whatever their thinking is. And you could guide that in different ways as a facilitator, you know, with different questions and so forth.
Super, that's really helpful, thanks.
Okay.
Hey, I have a general strategy question. So all of these ideas are great for raising awareness and learning more about the problems that we have in our world, but it's impossible to make any actual substantial change without having like being involved heavily political, being heavily involved in the politics of it. What's your plan for teaching people how to do that?
Well, I think you're trying to, with systems innovation, you're trying to create new spaces that bring people together in new ways, and policymakers and politics is definitely part of that, but it's one part of the mix for sure. So you need to have them in the room, but you need to have a whole plethora of people in the room. So the idea is that we aren't kind of drilling down and saying it's all about politics or it's all about government or whatever, and we've just got to go and influence some political party. We're saying we're going to create a new space here because it's about innovation, right? And we're going to bring people together and we're going to create structures that enable them to work together, see the system differently, map it out, and start to work together towards changes. And policymakers, government would obviously be part of that, would be a key part of that, but so would, you know, academia and industry and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give you at the moment.
To be more specific to what we're going to do, kind of surveying these different tools and templates and canvases, like pretty obvious that no one canvas is going to solve all of our political and collaboration problems. So like, that's a great nut to crack, but like, wouldn't that be an oversimplification? Yeah. But there's a whole bunch of fields that intersect in this, but I think the questions you're asking, Mr. Question Asker, are areas that start to get into like open strategy. And so it's not just how do you deal with complex problems, but how do you collaborate and marshal people to like unify and adapt and like do things well in complex situations. So there's lots of frameworks that start, or there's some emerging frameworks start to tackle that, but that is actually a different kind of like applied strategy collaboration problem. It's not like find a canvas that'll fix this for us like problem.
No, yeah, I understand. It's just something that we have to think about.
Sure. And yeah, you want to have those people in the room as you go along, for sure. Okay, let's stay going. We'll take a look at the systems mapping as the second section. So the first section, as I said, it's all about changing people's mentality, trying to shift from people who are just seeing individual parts in the system and trying to optimize those to them actually seeing the whole system, right? Changing their categories, changing their way of seeing the world. And that's super important because you're not going to be doing any systems innovation until you're aware of and operate on a kind of systems level. So if you don't do that, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity and potential. So the second section then is systems mapping, right? We've got that new way of looking, but now we actually need to jump in and get a detailed understanding of this system we want to change. So we shouldn't change system without first gaining a deep understanding of its overall structure and workings. The aim of systems mapping is to give us an in-depth analysis of the current state of the system. This section will walk members through the tools needed for them to start to build their own systems maps. So these are kind of the key dimensions to that. We're going to firstly build just a general map, right? Throw out what are the nodes, what are the connections, and that's actually very beneficial in and of itself before you get into dynamics and feedback loops and all of this. So we could call that giga mapping. It's just kind of getting everything out there on the wall. Obviously, you're doing this with a group of people, so you're trying to bring in everyone's perspective, how they're seeing this system. Might be a food system. You want the agribusiness, you want the policymakers, you want the finances and farmers and so forth. So it's very beneficial just in terms of getting everyone's insight into what's going on and putting it out there and starting to draw relations, and you're trying to build up a shared understanding of the system, because that's how people are going to start to make collective change. You can't really do that until you're on the same page. So we're trying to work through that, and you're having a discussion obviously as you do it. And that's one point, right? Canvases aren't solutions. They are platforms for people to have discussions, really. That's ultimately almost all you're doing. You're getting people together and you're enabling them to have productive discussions about the system they form part of and how they might come to a shared understanding of it and how they might change it together. A canvas, a workshop is not a solution. The process of doing it is what you're looking for, and that has to be done well and facilitated and so forth. So it's actually, it's an expression of kind of an emergent approach, right? You create platforms and then people are going to come in, they're going to interact and they're going to create things. And that's the way it works. So here we're building a systems map and we're thinking about the different dimensions to that. Who are the actors in this system? What are their kind of mental models and values and power and so forth? What's the structure of this network? What's the dynamics, so on and so forth? These are the canvases. So giga mapping, this is just kind of basic mapping. How do you may not even know what mapping is. So this one's really the absolute basics. What are the nodes in the system? What are the relations? Yeah, simple as that. But that's really where you should be starting. Then you want to think about the actors in this. So this is actor mapping, trying to do that in a holistic way. Consider, all dimensions to the person, their mental models, power, incentives, values, and so forth. And you're working through that collectively and posting it up. Then we have dynamics. So what's the dynamics? This is kind of systems dynamics, the stocks and flows. How are things flowing through this network? Where are the accumulations? Where is it lacking and so forth? You can see it here. And then network structure. So we're thinking about looking at the structure of this network. How is that? Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? Are there people with a lot of connections? Other people have very few. So it's kind of social network analysis and network analysis. How close are people in the network? Are there bridges? Are there links? So on and so forth. These all affect how the system is going to behave and so forth. How are things going to flow through this network? What's the diffusion? What's the resilience? So on and so forth. Doesn't go. Network analysis is quite technical. It doesn't go too deep into it, but it's just enough. This is the main canvas that kind of asks all those different questions, and will help you, just ask the key questions about this network and get an idea of its most important network structural features that will have a big influence, right? When you want to go and change this, you'll want to know, who are the influential people, how's something going to spread across this, so on and so forth. So that's in that section. There's a couple of other canvases that actually aren't kind of in that framework. There's the unknown unknowns, which is just thinking about what you don't know and what you may know, synergy mapping. You'll see a couple of others there. Yeah, anyway, back to this. Any questions on that section, the systems mapping, network analysis, so on and so forth? Everybody happy?
Josh, can I ask you, and I say this because there's a bunch of hubs, there's a bunch of other ways of slicing, dicing, and interconnecting people. What are the few biggest, most successful, something like maps, templates that you guys have done? And it could be that had the most people involved, but it could also just be like ended up having the most work done or ended up being the most impressive.
Well, as I say, we're just getting started on this, but the one last week was quite good. Yeah, there was about 50 people joined, mapping the transition towards a new paradigm in consumption. That was very good input. Actually, the one I showed you there with Jan, that was about 80 people there, and they went into breakout rooms and so forth. So, but we are just getting started with all of this. So,
and so that was the Amsterdam or Singapore?
Singapore, yeah.
Singapore.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, should I stay going? Any other comments at this time? And we have a lot coming up too in the pipeline, Robert. Just today, we're organizing in Sweden for food system, doing one on food systems. We're doing one on mental health here in London, and we've got others coming up in Mumbai around employment. We've done some around education and so forth. But yeah, a lot more in the future. Okay, I stay going. So the next section is systems change. So this is about influencing systems and how to guide them through transition processes. So now that we have an understanding of the system we wish to change, it's time to start to think about where and how we may influence it. One model for helping us to think about how change happens on these different levels is the multi-level perspective. So this is kind of used as a bit of a scaffolding for this section. I'll show you now in a minute, but it's a very prominent one used by a lot of different people. So it describes transition processes in socio-technical systems. This is a theory of change as it tries to describe how innovations can combine with macro level changes to disrupt the existing regime, so on and so forth. I'll show you what it looks like. It's trying to get a holistic view of kind of change within a complex adaptive system, and you've got these big changes happening up here on the landscape. Might be like globalization or the information revolution, big changes that are affecting things up there, the regime, the existing patterns that really dominate in the system, and then these are the niche new innovations. And this is what the canvas looks like. It's asking how do these niche innovations develop and grow and come to disrupt the incumbent system, supported by changes in the environment that create new opportunities through which we can develop a new system. And we have this systems change canvas here, which tries to capture a lot of this, the different aspects involved in a transition process. Okay, I've got the wrong one there, but it's just here. This one here. It's kind of an updated version of the multi-level perspective, incorporating many different things. So this is quite a substantial one. Getting to your question, Robert, about time and so forth. This one's obviously going to take a day or a number of days before you get very far compared to some of the others. But it's trying to really put in there a lot of the different factors. What are the macro trends, and how can we do like horizon scanning and scenarios and so forth to think about how that may develop up there, those big trends, and how they may converge to really create a space of disruption for the incumbent system down here. And the innovations down here, how may we enable and support them? Call that systems gardening. And then it kind of integrates a bit of the Three Horizons canvas. I'll talk about how this transition may come out, kind of the system that we want, the aspirational system, or it may get captured, you know, by the incumbent system, so on and so forth. There's a lot of bits and pieces to that, but that's trying to give the bigger picture of this whole. It incorporates the different canvases in this section around systems change and guiding transition processes.
I really like this one, and I like that it really has a mashup of like futurist techniques, you know, the way you would plan and forecast for this, and like particular industries and like the timelines of how you see them changing. So anyway, this is fantastic.
Yeah. It's also a bit of a beast, right? In terms of very substantial, a bit of wrestling down to be done to really turn it into something productive, I think. But yeah, but it's good for just getting a holistic perspective. So it incorporates this, the multi-level perspective. I showed you a bit that before. It looks like this, and that's the kind of standard canvas. We've used that a few times now. It's very good for getting an overview of what a transition process might look like, and to gather people's kind of insight on that. And get an overview. This is the horizon scanning and the three. Sorry, I have the bad canvas here, or the bad version of this. Let me just get the good ones. Toolkit. Yeah. So this is the two loops, or the three horizons. Sorry, it should be the three horizons one. Many of you, is quite well known, the Three Horizons framework. We're thinking about three dimensions to change. There can be an aspirational system, there can be business as usual, and then there are disruptive innovations driving that change. And you can work through each of those. And yeah, I won't jump into this now, but it's one way of thinking about how change may happen and may play out over time, considering that those changes may be captured by the incumbent system, or they may actually be turned into kind of your aspirational hopes for the future that you might like to see. That's one of them. Let's stay going. This one here, systems gardening. It's really about how do we kind of enable, how do we find those pockets of the future, and then, you know, these niche innovations that we've been talking about, and foster and develop them into potentially a new system that's going to disrupt the existing one. And then we have two loops canvas here. So this is a good one too. It's quite popular. It's thinking about systems change along two dimensions, right? There's an incumbent system that's going to, well, it's essentially it's going to fall to pieces, right, if this new system is successful. So it's looking at both the incumbent system and the new system and the relationship between the two, and something of the transition. So you think about, what does the incumbent system look like up here? What are the new innovations here, the pockets of the future? How can we enable this old system to, how can we hospice it to enable it to kind of decompose and be developed into a new system in a productive way instead of resisting that change? And then all along here, how can we help that process in terms of naming these new innovations, connecting them, nourishing them, and then illuminating this new system, and building bridges from the old system to the new. So it's a nice one. It's quite simple in terms of two loops, but it helps us think about that relationship in terms of the old and the new. And each of these only captures, like all models, only captures one kind of aspect. We shouldn't confuse them with reality. They're just models that help us see certain aspects and focus on that. This one helps us think about an important aspect in terms of what's the relationship between the incumbent system and this new system, and how can we really enable a successful transition and not end up in a very kind of conflictual relationship where we're wasting a lot of time and energy. Yeah. So that's that, the systems change section. Anybody, any comments or questions? Let's stay going.
Josh, some of the people were asking about free stuff, paid stuff. Again, all the canvases, tools, templates, guides are free. And I think someone was asking about the nature or the focus of some of the paid content.
Yeah, so all the canvases are free. The page content is just the courses on the website, so it doesn't really have anything to do with this. If you want to reuse these commercially in commercial workshops, then you need to purchase a membership pro on the website. But otherwise, you're welcome to use them as you wish, and you can access and download all of them for free. Yep. Thanks for picking that up. I'll just a little bit more, one more section, and then we'll take any final comments and wrap up. So this one's systems building. It's really the question of how do we build new systems? How do we develop new networks, new platforms, new ways for us to collaborate and work together? As we know, one organization isn't going to create these changes. It's going to require the collaboration and coordination of different individuals, capabilities, organizations, and we're thinking about how do we develop those networks, those platforms for systems innovation. So that's what we're doing here. And this is kind of what it looks like, this ecosystem thing, all right? What's the ecosystem we're building is the key question in the center there. Are we tackling homelessness? Are we tackling political paralysis or climate change or whatever it is? Who are these people we're going to have to bring together? These are the actors and the roles, the people that are going to have to be in this ecosystem. What are the activities that they're going to do to work together? What's the value model? How's this going to be supported? The incentives, so forth. What's the identity of this ecosystem? What's the story we're going to tell about it? So this is helping us to build ecosystems and platforms for systems change. And those are some of the different aspects. We don't have a canvas for all of these, but you can see this one here is the main one. It's really looking at each aspect of building a collaborative ecosystem. So you can see down here is the full picture of it. And yeah. So these are all the kind of questions we'll need to ask ourselves. What are the types of exchanges? What are the types of organizations and people involved here? How's this thing going to scale? How's it going to learn over time? What are the positive and negative synergies? What's the actual platform that's going to support this? How are we going to assess for outcomes? How are we going to do investments? So on and so forth. All questions you'd need to find answers to. And each of those is up here, and you can work through each of those. That's the bigger picture, and then the rest of this is kind of going into different aspects. There aren't canvases right at this moment for those two, but this one here, the identity one, how do we create an identity, a narrative around what we're doing and how we're going to bring people together, the story through which we're going to bring people together around this challenge. So that's the systems building. There's a few other bits and pieces in terms of canvases there that you'll find. Yeah, a few others here, like clarifying motives and incentives, systems leadership, the elephant canvas. You can take a look at all of these. Yeah, that's that. We're almost out of time. Happy to answer any final questions you might have. All good? Everybody happy? Okay, we'll wrap up then. I think there are football matches for us to go to if we're in Europe somewhere and we're that way inclined. So I think you can hear it in the background here. Yeah, great. And if you need any help with anything, you can send us or me an email, info@Systems Innovation. I'll just put that in the chat if you need support at any time. Yeah, I think that's that. And as I say, we'll be doing co-creations as we go along, different hubs. We've got them coming up in the future. So you're welcome to join those and you'll be able to get better experience in using them hands-on. There you go, guys. Thank you very much for joining and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Josh. I love you.